Welcome to my channel Brain Decoded. Today I'm taking you behind the scenes of your own brain, revealing how you can activate beast mode focus, not just hustle, not just trying harder, but harnessing real neuroscience to become unstoppable. If you've ever sat down to work, only to find your mind wandering, notifications pinging, the coffee cup calling your name, you're in the right place. Because today I'll show you how your brain actually works when it locks in, how you trigger it, and how you keep it locked in. Your brain's attention system is far more adaptable than most people realize. The circuits that control what you focus on, what you ignore, and how long you can hold your attention aren't fixed at birth. They change based on how you use them. Every time you direct your attention towards something specific, you're strengthening the neural pathways responsible for that behavior. And every time you let your mind drift, give in to distraction, or multitask without intention, you're training your brain in the opposite direction. Attention is plastic, meaning it rewires itself according to your daily habits. Consider the way your brain filters information. At any moment, there are thousands of sensory signals arriving from the world around you. Sounds, movements, lights, internal thoughts, emotional reactions, even the subtle posture adjustments your body makes. Yet, only a tiny fraction of those signals ever reach conscious awareness. The brain decides what deserves your focus by relying on interconnected networks, deep structures that prioritize relevance and cortical regions that refine precision. These networks strengthen with use. When you repeatedly ask the brain to return to a single target, you're reinforcing the pathways that say, "This matters." Stay here. But attention isn't just about locking onto something. It's also about suppressing everything else. The ability to filter distraction is just as trainable as the ability to focus. When you create conditions that reduce noise, turning off notifications, organizing your environment, setting clear goals, you're giving those inhibitory circuits room to work. Over time, the brain becomes more efficient at ignoring irrelevant input. It's not that the distractions disappear, it's that the brain learns not to give them priority. This is why people who practice deep work or meditation can drop into concentration faster than others. Their neural filters have been strengthened through repetition. Physiological state also plays a massive role. When your body signals alertness through proper breathing, posture, and light exposure, the brain's attentional networks become more responsive. You've probably noticed that focus comes easier when your body is awake and engaged compared to when you feel sluggish. This isn't a coincidence. Your brain depends on the right chemical environment, optimal levels of norepinephrine, dopamine, and acetylcholine. To achieve sustained concentration, these chemicals fluctuate based on your behavior, and they're also trainable. Every focus session, every deliberate period of attention, teaches your brain how to deploy these chemicals more efficiently the next time. It's important to understand that attention training doesn't require massive effort. You don't need hours of meditation or endless productivity hacks. What you need is repetition and consistency. When you set a specific task, minimize distractions, and return your attention each time it drifts, you're literally sculpting the attentional networks. The early moments feel difficult because the circuits are weak, but with practice, focus becomes increasingly natural. You'll start noticing that you enter deep concentration quicker, stay there longer, and recover faster from disruptions. Your attention system is a skill. Like any skill, it gets stronger the more intentionally you use it. The brain rewards consistency with rewiring. Over time, you become someone who focuses not because it's forced, but because your brain has been shaped to function that way. This is the science of training your mind, shifting from reactive, scattered attention to deliberate, powerful focus. True beast mode focus means not just adding more effort, not grinding harder, not forcing your brain into submission. It means understanding the biology of attention so deeply that you can work with it instead of against it. Most people misunderstand focus. They think it's about intensity, pushing, straining, clenching, trying to power through distractions. But real high-performance focus is far more elegant and much more scientific. It's about selective engagement and strategic inhibition. It's the brain's ability to amplify what matters and suppress what doesn't, and whether you realize it or not, the second part is just as important as the first. When your brain enters a deep state of concentration, it isn't simply increasing activity in the areas responsible for attention. It's also actively quieting down circuits that respond to irrelevant sounds, movements, memories, impulses, and emotional noise. This suppression is a biological necessity. Imagine trying to drive at top speed while leaving every dashboard alert blaring. You wouldn't go far. The brain handles this by lowering the volume on competing information so the signal you're focused on becomes dominant, and this process requires less effort than you think. If you prime the system correctly, people assume distraction means a lack of willpower, but in truth, distraction often means the brain hasn't properly switched into a high focus state. When you sit down to work, without intention, your brain is still scanning for input, still sensitive to every vibration, every notification, every internal thought. To shift into what feels like beast mode, you need to give the brain clarity, one target, one objective, one behavior. The more defined the goal, the more precisely your attentional networks can tune themselves. If you tell the brain work on everything, you get chaos. If you tell it focus on this one paragraph, the system locks in. Biology rewards precision, and once you understand that, effort becomes strategic instead of desperate. This is also why your physical state matters so much. When your body is alert, through proper breathing, correct posture, bright light, the brain naturally supports narrow focus. The chemistry shifts. Acetylcholine sharpens your sensory maps. Norepinephrine increases readiness. Dopamine elevates motivation. These aren't abstract ideas. They're the levers your brain uses to decide whether something deserves high priority or background status. When people describe that feeling of nothing can distract me, they're describing a moment when these chemicals align and the brain's filters are working at full power. But here's the truth, this state isn't something you stumble into. It's something you train. Every time you deliberately reduce distractions, every time you bring your mind back to the task, every time you set a clear intention before you work, you're reinforcing the circuits that stabilize focus. Repetition builds reliability. Over time, the brain becomes more efficient at entering deep concentration. Just like a muscle becomes stronger with repeated use. Beast mode focus isn't chaos, it's control. It's a calm, intentional narrowing of your world to a single point. And once you learn how to activate that state, you stop relying on motivation and start relying on neuroscience. That's when focus becomes effortless, powerful, and repeatable, day after day. The prefrontal cortex is the command center that allows you to direct your life with intention instead of being pulled around by impulses, distractions, and emotional noise. It's the part of the brain that lets you plan, focus, analyze, resist temptation, and stay on task even when the rest of your mind wants to wander. But it's important to understand that this region is not a rigid structure. It's dynamic. It's strengthened with use, weakens with neglect, and responds instantly to your internal state. When people talk about mental clarity or laser focus, they're describing a moment when the prefrontal cortex is fully engaged and guiding the entire brain. What makes this area so powerful is its ability to coordinate large-scale networks. When you choose to focus on a single task, the prefrontal cortex doesn't simply turn attention on. It reroutes resources. It signals sensory regions to enhance the details relevant to your goal and at the same time instructs other circuits to quiet down. It's like dimming the lights in a theater so the spotlight becomes even brighter. And although this seems effortless when it works, there's a complex physiological choreography underneath it, neural rhythms syncing, inhibitory systems activating, and chemical signals adjusting to tune the brain for high performance. One of the most interesting aspects of the prefrontal cortex is how sensitive it is to your internal environment. If you're fatigued, overwhelmed, stressed, or overstimulated, this region becomes less effective. That's why your focus collapses when you're asleep. Deprived or emotionally drained, the prefrontal cortex doesn't brute force attention. It needs the right conditions. It thrives when your body is alert but not anxious, calm but not sluggish. Even simple factors like proper breathing, hydration, and posture influence how well this region can orchestrate sustained concentration. When you optimize your physiological state, the prefrontal cortex becomes sharper, faster, and far more reliable. Another important truth: the prefrontal cortex trains itself based on your daily habits. If you multitask constantly, jump from app to app, or work in environment filled with interruptions, you're conditioning it to favor short, fragmented bursts of attention. But when you practice single tasking, set clear goals, and work in focused intervals, you're strengthening its ability to maintain long arcs of concentration. This is why people who consistently practice deep work can drop into focus more easily over time. Their prefrontal cortex has adapted to that mode of operation. This region is also deeply involved in self-control. When you resist distraction, when you choose not to check your phone, not to switch tabs, not to indulge every impulse, you're giving the prefrontal cortex a workout. It becomes better at managing urges, better at suppressing irrelevant thoughts, and better at keeping your behavior aligned with your long-term goals. People think discipline is a personality trait, but in reality, it's a neural skill, and the prefrontal cortex is the engine behind it. What makes all of this so empowering is the fact that you can shape it. Through deliberate practice, strategic habits, and small repeated choices, you strengthen the brain region responsible for staying on track in a world full of distractions. When the prefrontal cortex is trained and supported, focus stops being a struggle and becomes a natural state. A mental clarity that feels like everything unnecessary has fallen away, leaving only the task that matters. That's the power of learning how to use this part of your brain. To activate this focus state, the brain can't simply be told to concentrate, it has to be guided into it. Focus is a physiological shift, not just a mental decision. Your nervous system has to enter a zone of controlled alertness, high enough to stay engaged, low enough to avoid stress or jitter. This transition doesn't happen automatically. It's something you initiate through your behavior, your environment, and the signals you send your own brain. The first step is clarity. The brain cannot focus on a vague intention. It needs a single, well-defined target. When you specify exactly what you're going to do, one page, solve one problem, finish one section, you're giving the brain a precise anchor. This activates the neural circuits that stabilize attention because the mind now knows what to enhance and what to ignore. Without that clarity, the brain remains in a scanning mode, looking for stimuli, instead of locking onto one. Next, you need to adjust your internal state. Focus relies heavily on the balance of neuromodulators like norepinephrine and acetylcholine. You can influence these chemicals through your behavior in the first 60 seconds of any task. A deep inhale through the nose, followed by a long, controlled exhale helps shift the autonomic nervous system into a place where alertness and calm coexist. This balance is the sweet spot for sustained concentration. Your breathing patterns act like a lever on your focus machinery. Use them intentionally. Light also plays a crucial role. Bright, forward-facing light signals the brain that it's time to be alert. When your visual system detects high luminance, it triggers neural pathways that support sustained attention. This is why working in dim, warm light makes you feel sluggish, while bright, natural, or cool light makes your brain more responsive. Your eyes are not just sensors. They are part of your brain's alertness circuit. Posture is another key factor. When you sit upright, the brainstem circuits associated with engagement become more active. Slouching pulls you toward a more passive, low-energy state. Something as simple as straightening your spine and aligning your head forward tells your nervous system, "We're on." These signals may seem subtle, but they have immediate effects on the brain regions that govern executive function. Then comes the environment. Your brain cannot fully activate high focus mode while processing multiple streams of irrelevant information. When you clear your workspace, silence notifications, and choose a quiet or controlled environment, you're giving your attention system a clean runway. The brain's inhibitory circuits become more efficient when there is less noise to filter out. Focus becomes easier not because you're trying harder, but because there's less to fight against. Finally, you need a ritual. Consistency trains the brain to switch states faster. If each focus session begins with the same cues, breath, posture, lighting, task selection, neural pathways involved in attention start to recognize the pattern. Over time, your brain associates these actions with deep work, and the transition becomes automatic. What initially takes effort eventually becomes a conditioned response. You're teaching your nervous system how to enter focus mode with precision and reliability. Activating this state isn't about force, it's about signaling. It's about aligning your physiology with your intention. When you do that, the brain responds with clarity, depth, and an intensity of focus that feels almost effortless. You are more powerful than you give yourself credit for, but power isn't unleashed by noise, it's unleashed by clarity, by design, by neural preparation. If you adopt this as your new baseline, you can consistently bring your brain into beast mode, locked in, tuned out the irrelevant, hitting deep work after deep work. So, here's your takeaway. Prepare your environment, prime your body, narrow your target, execute in blocks, recover wisely. Do that, and you'll harness the real science of unstoppable focus. Thank you for joining me on Brain Decoded. Go ahead now, choose one action right after this video and show up not just to work but to dominate. I'll see you next time.